Hey there, welcome to the Classical Liberal Project. My name is Danielle. I'm here with Jonathan Casey, chair of the Classical Liberal Caucus,
Hello, hello.
and Ryan Graham here with LP Georgia.
Yep. Hey.
And we're going to talk to Ryan a little bit about what's going on down in Georgia, what he's been doing with the party, what he wants to see the party doing, and maybe touch on his race for lieutenant governor as well. So,
Cool.
welcome, Ryan.
Sounds good. Thanks for
How
having me on.
many? How many? What was your vote count
Oh
for
boy.
lieutenant
Oh
governor?
my God. You know
Or
what? You
you can
should have
get
had
something
me go.
close.
Yeah, should have had me go look it up beforehand. Like 80,000 some odd
Oh,
votes.
okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Something like that. I was the highest vote get no second highest vote getter. I think that wasn't. Um, so Ted Metz actually ran for Secretary of State here, and there was a lot of um, drama within the Republican Party about the Republican candidate who was the sitting Secretary of State, and so he got a lot of like MAGA vote, honestly.
Okay, okay, kind of siphoned off some people.
Yeah, because our Secretary of State is like, there was like a phone call where Trump said you got to find some amount of votes, and then he refused to do it, and so all the
Right.
Trump people like hate him, and so they just went. If they might have voted for Kemp and they might have voted for my opponent, but then when they got to Secretary of State, they were like, no way.
Brad Raffensperger.
Yeah,
Yes,
Raffensperger.
yeah, I remember hearing about that phone call, and I know that Trump's still under investigation of some sort
Yeah,
for
they're
that whole thing.
actually they're investigating it here. Our DA did a grand jury, and there was a whole investigation, and that is going to get those
Hmm.
indictments will come down sometime soon.
And they have made recommendations. The special
Yep.
purpose jury is
Yep.
done, and the
Yep.
Atlanta Journal-Constitution did a really good podcast about it. I followed
Yeah.
it.
They're okay on some things.
Yeah. I love the investigative stuff.
Yeah. And honestly, like when I was running for office, I built up a really good relationship with the reporter from the AJC who was covering the lieutenant governor's race. And to the point where I didn't do it, but she was like, "Hey, we should meet up somewhere and like have a discussion about whatever." Or if you're having events, and the way I ran my campaign, I didn't like plan a lot of events. I went to other people because the whole point was to, talk to other folks outside of the party. So I didn't do a lot of rah campaign party type stuff. And so she didn't get to come to any of those things, but we had a couple of really good conversations. So
Cool.
One thing I did notice is kind of an outside observer looking at the Georgia elections between you and Chase Oliver. I felt like you guys got more media attention. Obviously, Chase with the runoff, but even prior to the runoff, you guys really got a lot more media attention than a lot of libertarians get around the country. You both were in the debates. How what would you tell other libertarians trying to get that same attention from media?
Well, I mean, so for me, one of the strategies was once I knew who the reporter who was covering my race was, she got DMs about stuff. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to do a press release a little bit later about this thing. Be on here. Here's a copy of it beforehand, and it's going to go out, this afternoon or something." And so I'd send her stuff early, and I would just kind of talk to her about things, and she got to the point where she'd just text me and be like, "Hey, can you give me a quote on whatever topic?" And I could always give her one real quick. And so like she just included me in all of her pieces, except for one, which is fine. She said she included me, but her editor took me out. So, um, but yeah, just building up a good personal relationship with the people who are going to cover you. That was what it was. And then the other thing I did was instead of doing big, long, drawn out press releases, big page long, whatever, things like that, I would just get a quick and dirty something out. Just here's my quote on the thing, and it would be like literally, a couple lines, and it's just like here you go, and people would pick that up, and I did really well with it, and I didn't have to stress about like making a formal press release, and I think reporters like that. I don't know. No one told me that, but I think they do.
I've
I mean,
heard
they
that
paid
too.
attention.
They want you to just give them the story. They'll print it as if you make their life easy.
Yeah, they don't want to work very hard, just like the rest of us, right?
Well, I think our attention spans have gotten so short that anything beyond a paragraph is too much, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and third party, I mean, they're already looking for a reason not to cover me, and if they have to read a ton of stuff before they can get to what I want to say, then I'm not doing my job right.
How
Yeah.
did you get into the debate? How did you and Chase and Shane, Shane Hazel, the governor, how did you
Yeah,
guys
so
get
in
into the debates?
Georgia, the Georgia Public Broadcasting does a debate, or GPB. Yeah, GPB does a debate every year, and they always include. It's the Atlanta Press Club and GPB, and they always include everybody on the ballot. So I had a conversation with one of the Atlanta Press Club board. I think it was the board co-chair, Rahul Bali, and I told him, thank you for always inviting us. And he's like, as long as I'm on the board, every candidate who is on the ballot will be in these debates. So that they've committed to it, and as long as I've been involved, we've been included in those debates. And if we were solo, we'd be the only one up there. Like if we were the only ones to say yes, they'd just put us up there. So
Do you
yeah,
think
it's
that's
really
a
good.
do you think that having a runoff election, do you think that that helps kind of push media, mainstream media to kind of have a more inclusive debate? Because it is, it does, having a runoff does make the, third party vote, it changes how important that third party vote is.
Um, I don't know. Claim they don't like it. But they make so much money off runoffs. I don't know why they wouldn't. I mean, I guess the reporters don't see that money, right? They just get paid their salary no matter what. But I don't know. It's sort of weird. I don't know how much of a part that plays in it. I think that you know, th- I wasn't around, but I think there was some litigation or threats of litigation because GPB is a public company, right? They receive funding, public funding, and so like some 14th Amendment equality under the law, equal protection stuff. I'm pretty sure that played a part. So
Gotcha.
there is also like some government strong arming a little bit, but the so like you'll notice Shane and Chase were not invited to the private media debates. They were not, they weren't included in those. So
Gotcha. How did you prepare for the debate? Do you have any of the questions up hand? Do you just kind of look at what previous debates had talked about? How do you prepare for something like that?
I don't prepare very well. I'll tell you what. No, just the certain topics. So like I had a statement on abortion written down. I had my opening and closing written down. Those were my two weakest things I thought in my debate because I did not memorize them. It's a 2-minute intro and a 2-minute outro. If anyone's listening that needs to prep for a debate, like if you have it handed to you, have it memorized. Don't read it. I rewatched it and I'm just like, man, that was the crappy part. Um, and then I'll tell you what, I get really nervous. And when you're there, I don't know if you guys have done. Well, I guess Jonathan, I know you've done a a public debate. Um,
Yep.
I mean, I could see that they were nervous too, but I was like, I took a beta blocker beforehand, and so I could like calm down, and I don't know. But the off the cuff things, I really I think I did better. When they asked me a question and I wasn't sure what it is. Um, the thing that's good about that and about being a libertarian is it is kind of easy to, even if you don't 100% know the answer, to go back to your first principles and just answer it the way that you might think it should be answered in a libertarian way, right? Get the government out of it, and whatever the individualist part of it is. I mean, there's always a way to relate it back to libertarianism and get that word out there.
Yeah.
Now now you said you didn't have a lot of, like, formal events. How did you reach voters? What were your tactics to get to them
Yes
that
to
way?
everything I got invited to. Um,
Alright.
yeah, so if I got invited to a forum, I went, and I was very often the only statewide candidate from any party at a lot of these events. And people would come up and talk to me and say, "I've never heard of you guys. What are you all about?" And I'm like, "Well, what's important to you? I'll talk about that." And just
Nice.
yeah, a lot of people would say, I didn't know what a libertarian was before you. I think your ideas are great. I'm a Democrat, so I'm voting Democrat, or I'm a Republican, so I'm voting Republican. But man, this has been a great conversation. And it sort of like reinvigorates you. You do like the social media stuff that kind of turns toxic sometimes, or it's just kind of hard to carry on conversations with people in a good, meaningful way. Um, But when you're like face to face with people, um, you really feel like you're moving the needle. Maybe you're moving it less. I don't know, but it feels really good. It feels it charges the battery.
No,
No,
I hear that from a lot of candidates.
yeah, after the Soho debate, I was nervous just like you.
Yeah,
Um, but after the Soho debate, I talked to a lot of people that came up to me and said, "Listen, you changed my mind on this,"
yeah,
and that is a
yeah. You did
real that is
really well.
that is a really powerful thing to hear. I that was one thing I didn't know what to expect after the debate, right? And I had a lot of people I mean, a dozen people come up after the debate saying, I came into this debate supporting national divorce. Now I'm on the other side of that. And so it's really powerful when you know that you've planted a seed in somebody's mind. You've given them some, a different way to look at things.
Yeah.
I really think that that's a really, excuse me, a really powerful thing when you can actually impact people, even just a little bit. They came to an event for you. They came to a debate for me, whatever it is. When you can actually speak to people, that's a really powerful thing. And I think that we have to find ways to make our ideas viral, right? Not
Yeah.
just social media wise, but talking to people. People like to share ideas. They talk to each other. You hear it all the time in your workplace, wherever. You hear people talking about the news, about what they've heard, about they've seen. And if we can get those kind of positive viruses, the talking to each other
Mhm.
viruses going, that really is far more impactful than getting something virtually trending.
And
Well,
I
and
love
we
that.
do we just have like a fundamentally different way to look at things. And so people I think appreciate hearing that third perspective on something that's like out of the mainstream. Our answer is really like, what are we arguing about this for? The government shouldn't be doing it, or something. They're like, you know what? That's true. What's happening? you know?
I love that you approach people with a question first where they're like, "Tell me about you," and you're like, "Okay, but what's important to you?" Like, because that
Yeah.
is how you're gonna reach people, right?
Yep.
Through things
Yeah, I
that
had
they're
people that
passionate
talked
about.
about education, and I was big on, well, school choice was like as a first step to educational freedom. And I talked to some teachers who were not for school choice, but when I said, you should control your classroom and not be told what your curriculum is, you should have a lot of freedom because you're the expert, right? You're the one that was hired to because you were educated in education. You're the professional. You're the expert. You should have a lot more freedom, and politicians shouldn't be telling you what to do in your classroom. And they were like, you are 100% correct. And so, they it's hard to get people to get that, and then also, don't vote Democrat because they want to control you. They don't. You got to find a way to thread the needle, connect those dots without attacking, so that you can win them over. And so that's always a fun time.
Yeah.
No, I think teachers see the bureaucracy that they're in. They know the
Oh yeah,
problems. I mean, you can look at you can just look at the statistics on how ratio of teachers to administrators, and administrators just balloon to many times the number of teachers. So I think if you speak to them on that level and figure out what people are looking for, figuring out what issues they have in the classroom, and show them, hey, this is a solution for you.
yep,
I think that would make a big difference for a lot of teachers.
yep.
So you were also the chair of the LP Georgia. How long were you a chair there
Um,
for?
for like 2.5 to 4 years, something like that. So it was sort of weird because when I was vice chair, our chair actually went into the hospital for some surgery, and I ended up sort of taking over for a little while then, and then I ran for chair and got it. So I sort of think there's overlap on that side, and then I resigned early last year during the campaign, and after uh, stuff happened. So
One thing I saw you mention the other day on Twitter was how you were kind of reflecting a little bit. You had said something to the effect of you would wish you'd been able to train people up into leadership behind you, and that's one of
yeah,
the things that I try to do as a chair, and it's difficult. It's difficult in different situations, but I think it's really important. It's a really important aspect of leadership is bringing on younger leaders, bringing them in, showing them the ropes. Where would you have started? Where would you have liked to go back and say, okay, this is where I would have done, this is what I would have done differently?
Well, honestly, it's just hard to find people, because I would poke and prod and be like, "Hey, I think you'd make good leadership in the future. What do you think about that?" And most people are like, "Heck no." Right off the bat, people are like, "Nah," And the only reason I was chair because I raised my hand and said, you know, I've I I I want it. Because I think I have a positive vision, but I don't really want to do it. And my whole idea about being chair was to build it into an organization that could have somebody that actually had experience that to want it, right? So like that was I wanted to build it into something that somebody more capable than me wanted to be in charge of because we were at such a point where it's just like there's just not a lot of people raising their hands. So but yeah, I would go around and I try to find people. A lot of them said no. They weren't interested. We're finding some of those people saying yes now, which is good. But I didn't get to put them under my wing quite as much as I'd like. And I think one of the most important things a chair can do is figure out their succession, and try to get people in a good place to continue any momentum that you've got going. And that was what I tweeted the other day is that I failed at that. I did a bad job. That's what I wish I would have done better at.
My entire county disappeared this year. We just shut it down, so don't feel bad. I
Yep.
was vice chair
Yep.
and treasurer right before that happened.
Yep. It happens. It's hard too because we want to have people who are professional and have these skills already. But typically people that come to the LP, they don't have those skills because if they did, it would be because they were a Republican or a Democrat that's active, and really is passionate about those things. And so usually you don't have those people with those skills come over to us. We have to get them while we're in the party. I mean, we roll with the punches, right? We're just like, what's next? Okay, let's figure this out.
Mhm.
How do I plan an event? I don't know. Let's just do it.
We are very reactive and not so much proactive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we're all learning on the job.
Yeah.
So
So you for a while there was a lot of, it was pretty even sailing for a long time in LP Georgia, and then I know that you resigned and kind of you feel like some things have hit some rough seas recently. You want to kind of go into that and where you think you can, how you think, because this is happening all over the place.
sure.
I mean, you're talking about Michigan, Massachusetts, Delaware, New Mexico, heck, New Hampshire. I mean, it happens all over the place, and I have a feeling that this is just something that happens through affiliates all the time.
Yeah.
What kind of vision can you give LP Georgia and other affiliates? I'm like, okay, how do we find a pathway out of this? How do we get back to working together? How do we get back to doing what we all want to do, which is impact this country for liberty?
Right. Well, we were calling ourselves the Get Shit Done Caucus, because no matter what people identified as, or whatever caucus they were in or not in, or most of us weren't in one, we just worked together. So when Mises people would come up and say, "I want to start a county affiliate," I'm like, "All right, here's the tools, here's the training, here's I'll train you up, and then here's your list, make your phone calls, do all this stuff. Like here's what the plan is to get it done." So I helped a couple of them get county affiliates going. And then, when one of the things that I did was when we had new executive committees, I would call them all and say, "What's important to you?" And try to figure out maybe what I should put somebody on. So if somebody's like, "Oh, I really think our membership should be higher." All right, well, you can be on the membership committee and come up with a plan, and this can be like your baby, because I think you should be interested in the things that you volunteer for. A lot of Mises people wanted to be involved in communications. So I would push them to write blog posts for us. We did a podcast for a little while, and so we'd have them come in and do segments on that. And then we also do and then on social media, there was a little bit of a little churn on that, because they wouldn't. I would push back on certain things, and say, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't do this," and they'd get mad and quit. But the person who runs the social media now, I put him in place before I resigned. So I really was just like, "What's important to you? Let's do it. Let's work together on it. Let's collaborate and make sure that like we're all moving in the same direction, and I wouldn't take that back. When I resigned, I resigned because I was running for office, and that was taking up a lot of time. I was also having some personal issues going on at the same time. Still do, but I started having to look at what my workload was and say where's my biggest effort and my lowest return on that effort. And chair actually was really high on that. It just took a lot out of me, and I spun my wheels a lot there. So I was like, you know what? My vice chair, he's competent. Like he's pretty good. He can do it. I have faith in him. Um, and I can step down and focus on my campaign and focus on training candidates. That was a big thing for me. Um, and so that's what I shifted into. And so my vice chair was also was Mises Caucus. And so I was just like, well, we've been working well together, so this won't be a problem. Where it's become a problem is some of our outward marketing. I mean, people know our Twitter account. They're kind of they're very crass. They've said stuff that is racist. They've done the anti-Semitic stuff, and the people who run it, if you go to their personal profiles, they are dropping words that shouldn't be said, and calling people names that should not be called within the movement. And I don't know. It's just where we've gotten to, and I don't know. We got big plans to go to convention and change things.
That's all you can do. Well,
I feel like
all you can do
when I
without.
was chair, it kept the peace because people respected that position. But as soon as I wasn't there, it was like done. Just no more respect. Like the only reason I had the respect was because of the position. So, and that kind of sucks. But there's a good group of people in Georgia, including people in the Mises Caucus. Still, they're not all. I really want to stress that it's not a caucus thing. It's a individual behavior thing. There are certain people who are behaving very poorly, and that's what I'm against.
No, if anybody goes to Ryan's Twitter feed, they'll see him talking about how you should never collectivize blame on people. You should be very very individualistic in what you point flaws or issues with people. It should be on an individual level.
Yeah, and I
So
make
I appreciate
mistakes
your
too.
perspective.
Like I will collectivize sometimes, and then there's one guy who follows me. He's a lawyer, and he'll be like some people, some whatever, because I'll say like Republicans think blah blah blah. And he's like some Republicans think that, and I'm like thank you, you're right.
No. You can listen. You don't collectivize libertarians. You can collectivize Republicans and Democrats all you want, Ryan. Come on now.
I do often say Republicans in leadership, though, or like elected Republicans think this, and I do try to do that because I think that part of messaging, when you say Republicans do this or I don't like Republicans, you're talking to people who identify as Republican or Democrat, whatever, and so you're going to push them away necessarily. But as soon as you say like Republicans or Democrats in power or elected ones, they know you're talking about the politicians, and they don't feel like you're talking about them. Now they know you're talking about that political class, and a lot of them don't like the political class. So
Well, yeah. Think about how much damage Hillary Clinton did by calling Trump supporters degenerate or not
yeah,
degenerate. Oh my God, I forgot the word.
you know
Uh,
what? You made me lose it too.
I what despicables? No, Danielle, you muted.
It's just
I
degenerate in my brain now too, so.
I know, right? Now I can't get that word out of my brain because I don't remember why. What was it? With despicables? I forget. But then they adopted that idea. They adopted that identity.
Deplorables.
Deplorables. That's it. That's it.
Deplorables.
There we go.
Yeah,
Wow, I
people wore
could
that with a badge of honor. They started
exactly.
saying, "Well, I'm a deplorable."
Yeah.
Well, so did Hillary's people too, though. They had their bitch label or whatever it was. I don't remember.
Oh, I don't remember that one.
No.
Yeah.
I'll look it up for next time.
Well, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Nasty Woman, right? It was Nasty
Yes,
Woman.
Nasty Women. Yep.
That's right. I do remember that. I mean, that was so. It feels like the Hillary campaign was so long ago. I mean, it was 7 years ago. I
see like statements from
Ugh,
her,
that
and
was
I'm like, what? You're
How is she
You're
still a thing?
you're not retired? Like, what is this?
You should be taking care of your husband, ma'am.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah, that I don't understand how they're like a bad politicians these days are just like bad pennies. They just won't ever go away. I mean, think about it. We've got Joe Biden, and we'll probably end up with a Biden versus Trump again. I just it makes
Versus
you
Joe
sick to your stomach.
Exotic.
It's like this is the best we've got. I mean, I think that if to some degree it should be encouraging, right? With libertarians, we see all these young people, they're not getting into the Republican Party, they're not getting into the Democratic Party, they're not getting involved in the political process because they see that it's rigged, they see that it's not going to serve their interest. We've got to figure out steps to actually take advantage of that because they know that the Republicans and Democrats are basically the same thing. So we got to figure out the solutions and the way to attract them into the party, into the liberty movement. If we
Right.
if we don't do that, we're kind of dead in the water.
Yeah. Got to be
Amen.
more welcoming in in my eyes. The other thing that I like to talk about a lot is that we should be more big tent. And I call wow, that was a big thunder. I don't know if you guys could hear that. It scared me though. Um,
Mhm.
I think that we're a big tent, and I think we go all the way from anarchist to constitutionalist and everything in between. And I know a lot of people would argue with me about constitutionalists, but I think they're more than welcome. If we ever got back to a constitutionalist form of government, we would be. I mean, it would take most of our lives to get there. I mean, that would be such a huge win for libertarians, and then they could peel off and go do their own thing. If as soon as they're like, oh, anarchists and minarchists and classical liberals, they're a little too much for me. I'm gonna leave now, and like now we work together, and that's it.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is we kind of spend a lot of time about the spectrum of libertarianism, but the other thing too is we need to understand that not all our voters don't need to be libertarian. Our politicians need to be
Right,
libertarian who are putting up on the public stage. Those need to be solid libertarians. But we need to be able to attract non-libertarians. Otherwise, we'll never win an election.
right,
So we need to be very careful when we're saying that we're talking about, we're a spectrum of libertarianism. Yes, we should make sure that the party and the party, involved members and our candidates are true, the real libertarians. But we need to be able to attract non-libertarians. We need to go to those special issues and say we can agree with you on this issue. Let's get pot legalized. Let's get school choice passed. Let's get these common issues that we can partner up with other people on and bring them in to get them to vote for us. We should be attracting everyone across every political spectrum with whatever issue we can that they agree with us on.
yeah. I also think that there's a way of selling libertarianism to people, whether you're talking to somebody who's traditionally a Democrat or traditionally a Republican or left or right leaning. I really don't like left and right, but um, if they speak those languages, you need to be able to talk about libertarian in their language, and really like appeal to what they are accustomed to. So you might talk about racism, and with like somebody who's more traditionally leftist. You might talk about like how the government, and systemic racism and all you start using some of those buzzwords to talk about your libertarian ideas. It doesn't mean you're not being a libertarian. It means you're talking to them in their own language so that they can be more welcome to it. But also just I have seen some libertarians get away from their principles when they're trying to appeal to some voter base, and they will say things that aren't libertarian at all. And I just think that we have to give more thought to how to make the libertarian ideas appealing, not get rid of the libertarian ideas to appeal, but like find a way to make those libertarian ideas appealing to some group or whatever. And that's possible. It's doable. I remember
Oh
Larry
yeah.
Sharp talking about privatizing the bridges in and out of New York City, and making like Pepsi sponsors one of the bridges or something, and they get to advertise on it and whatever. But like now you don't have the toll, and now you don't have the taxpayers doing it. It's Pepsi paying for it or whomever. I think that's it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you can talk to any. I mean, Danielle, you're on the West Coast. I mean, you can talk to people about NIMBYism or yeah, YIMBYism out there, and about how that's a huge impact on house, cost of housing. I think that you can get to a Republican and a Democrat in a room, and they can talk all day past each other, and they'll never find any commonality, or they'll always attack each other. With a Libertarian and either of those, You can find commonality. You can say, we want to solve the same problems that you do. We can go to the Democrats and say, we want to solve how the price of housing. We
Right.
want to solve the war on drugs. We want to solve, systemic racism. Here's how here's how you can do it.
Right.
Right. Your politicians have had the opportunity for, a past century to solve these issues, and they haven't. And then with Republicans, we can go look at them and say, we agree. The government shouldn't be dictating what's being taught in schools. We agree that we should, that you should have the right to own a gun. There's these issues that we can agree with them on and say we agree, but here's the solution. And so we can actually provide solutions to both Republicans and Democrats. Whereas they don't ever provide solutions to each other. They just talk past each other. They claim that the other person is, like, the Republicans are claiming that Democrats want to take their guns, or Democrats are claiming that Republicans want to indoctrinate their children. Whatever the situation is,
Right.
They're just going to be sitting there accusing each other. Whereas libertarians, we have the opportunity to kind of get in the middle of the culture war and say, hold on. There's a solution here, and both sides can be happy with it. It's called getting government out of all individual choices. Then Republicans don't have to care what Democrats do, and Democrats don't have to care what Republicans do.
We have one thing in common with everyone. It's that we think the people that they don't like also suck.
Generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
I did actually get a lot of good feedback when I tweeted this out a lot over my campaign and afterwards, but that if you don't want something politicized, don't put politicians in charge of it. People get all upset. They're like, education shouldn't be political. I'm like, stop. Don't put politicians in charge of it then. They shouldn't be public schools. I mean, that's the argument against public schooling, is that you're putting politicians in charge of it. Educators should be in charge of it. Parents should be in charge of it. Students. I mean, I do self-directed education with my kid. So my student's in charge of her education with some guidance. But I mean, that resonated with people quite a bit. There's another example I had when I first moved into my neighborhood. So my neighborhood was kind of a gentrification type situation, traditionally black neighborhood. There was a developer moving in, so it's where the Braves used to play. And so when they moved out, then a developer and Georgia State University bought a bunch of the land, and there were people out there protesting the developer coming in and building up the area, which I think is like, what, don't you want like the grocery store and the shops and the restaurants and all that stuff? Like, that's nice to have, right? This place was a ghost town before, and so they get mad at it, and I'm saying, or they're getting mad at gentrification and then the development company. And I went down to where they were protesting, and I said, what's the problem here? Like, what is the result that you guys are not, that's not good, And it's displacement. It's people being moved out of their own houses. And so what ends up happening is when the development company comes in, they build up the area, that increases property values, which increases property taxes, which people that have had multi-generational homes are not used to paying anything for their house. And all of a sudden they've got this giant tax bill and they can't even afford it. And so now they've got to move out. So that was one of them. So of course we have a great answer to that, right? That's not the development company's problem. That's a property tax problem. I'll march with you to talk about property taxes. Like, where are we marching? Let's do it. And the other major thing that they were complaining about was eminent domain, the use of eminent domain for the use of development. So Georgia allows the government to eminent domain property and then sell it a year after to private interest groups. So they don't even have to sit on it for very long. But that's happening all over my neighborhood. Eminent domain, the city, the state, everyone is like taking people's property. And I'm like, I'm completely anti that. I mean, like, they should make you an offer, and if it's not a good enough offer for you, then you get your property. Like, that's all there is to it. They don't get to decide what it's worth.
Especially if it's not for like a community thing. It's a private developer. Like, it would make more sense if it was like to save a rainforest region. So like, we just really need this area, guys. But
they did. So there was one. There's a big to do around here because they wanted to eminent domain in like this floodplain. So there's really bad flooding in my neighborhood, not where I am, which is great. It's all because I'm a little up the hill, but at the bottom of the hill, there's really bad flooding problems. But they wanted to put in like a Japanese garden or something, but they were going to take like this whole street's worth of old multi-generational homes, people who have had their house paid off for a long time. They actually had a housing group come in and come up with a another option to fix the flooding, right? So they were like, "Hey, here's an alternate plan that doesn't have you taking our property." And the city just was like, "Nope, we want it, and we want that Japanese garden." And there was this big fight, and I don't even know where they're at with that right now. I haven't heard a lot, which makes me worried.
Well, I think that I think a lot of those, we talk about systemic racism. I think that that plays into a lot of this because you have a lot of these policies that are designed to force poor blacks out of their homes. I mean, anybody who wants to, you should look up redlining. If you've never looked up the practice of redlining, where cities would basically draw a red line through a black neighborhood and no, that's where the highway goes. It was intentionally designed to split black neighborhoods apart and try to get them out of their city because they weren't wanted. And so that so that is we've got these systemic issues in our society that play out and still today. I mean, you still got those property taxes, like you're saying. People aren't used to paying these. Their area gets built up, and then they have to leave, or they've been for generations. I think we have to. I think we as libertarians sometimes some of us seem to kind of dismiss the idea of systemic racism because we hear the charge of racism all the time. It's racist. That's racist. This is racist. And so we dismiss it. But in reality, the
Some things
government's been
are.
doing racism for a long time. So we have to take that into account. And it's okay to message to that and
Right.
tell people, yes, the government's been racist for this whole time. Let's not make more government. Let's get
Yeah,
less government. Let's
that
make
is a
less.
reason to be a libertarian, so that they
Exactly.
can't use their
Exactly.
monopoly on violence to further this racism that ends up happening.
Exactly.
And sometimes I don't even think they mean to necessarily. Like
Right.
you see like minimum wage laws. Minimum wage laws were created in the first place as a racism. It was meant to keep people who did not necessarily have I don't like saying unskilled labor, but like low skill labor, entry level labor. It was a lot of black people at that time, and they were like, we can decimate their workforce by saying you must pay people more than they're willing to pay a black person. And they were on the record. I mean, they were excited about this plan because back then it was okay to say things like that out loud, and they did. But now it's like a Democrat rallying cry, minimum wage, and I'm like, but you know what it does, right? And like why it was there, and I don't think that I don't think they're meaning to do that. I don't think that is their plan anymore. I think they think it's a good idea, but they don't. It's unintended consequences. So it's the seen and the unseen, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you have to judge a policy by its results, not its intentions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I work for a local small business. There are 5 of us, 2 owners, 3 employees, and the employees actually make more than the owners because of minimum wage. Like I make a tipping wage and it's still more than the owners.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
that is crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah, where can people find you, Ryan? What are you doing these days? Where should people look for you?
Well, I'm not doing. I actually was political director for a little while for LP Georgia, and I recently resigned on that due to some differences opinions with current leadership in LP Georgia. They made it clear to me in no uncertain terms they did not want my help, and so I decided not to anymore. But there are still leaders who I do help, and so I've been helping out some of that with some side work and organizing to have a much more welcoming leadership team. And then, but mostly I'm on Twitter right now. So my handle is at Graham4, the number 4 GA, and I try to be more positive on there. I try to say not I don't know. I try to not comment directly on our stuff, our drama, our our internal party stuff. I hesitate to call it drama at this point because I think it's escalated a little past that. But um, I will like subtweet a lot. So somebody acting poorly will give me an idea about a tweet because it'll be more like this is how we should be acting, and it's not. I don't directly criticize anybody. I'm just like, hey, it'd be really cool if more of us didn't do this, or did this exactly. And then just talking about policy around Georgia mostly. I like listening to Georgia politics stuff, and I usually have some kind of comment on whatever the happenings are. So, but that's where I'm most active right now.
Right on.
Jonathan, you are muted.
Oh, I was muted. I pulled a Danielle. No, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on, Ryan. I just throw
Yeah.
her under the bus there. Thank you for coming on, Ryan. Appreciate your time. It's always interesting to hear what's going on around the country and see how things are going. So I appreciate you coming on.
No problem,
Yeah.
man.
Thank you
Thanks for
much.
having me.